All right, everyone, let's get the show started. Welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's June 1st, 2022. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator, which just means that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with your teams and showing them the ropes. So if that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. For those of you new to the call, the format's very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. So feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to jump in and participate. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/officehours. We host these calls every week. Our call today is recorded. We'll automatically post a recording of the session today to our YouTube channel. So if you enjoy this content and want to support it, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. Just head over to youtube.com/cloudposse and hit subscribe. If you want to share these videos with your team, it's a great way to grow the community and expand the number of participants we have. So please go ahead and share this recording with your teammates. So with that said, let's jump into some announcements. I'm a little bit light today, but here's some things that caught my radar. There was a Hacker News post about Dragonfly. It's a new alternative to the traditional Redis and Memcache services. It speaks the same wire protocol, albeit with certain less functionality. And it just struck me, one of the top comments there was like, because they describe modern Dragonfly as a modern approach to Redis and Memcache. And yet here I am feeling so old school and thinking, Redis and Memcache are still modern. Dating myself. So Dragonfly radically outperforms the stalwarts of Redis and Memcache in certain key areas that they have tested here. They're using some a standard benchmarking tool, Memtier, to achieve these, and they're pretty upfront about what their assumptions were. Fortunately, don't have those problems right now. Another one is interesting to me is from AWS's new organization, relatively new organization, their infrastructure automation organization, AWS IA. And a few things stand out about this. So AWS IA got off to a rocky start. It's been, well discussed on this show and on Medium posts around on what went wrong there. But with EKS blueprints, looks like they've turned a corner. Looks like, for one, is that they've started accepting pull requests. Many of the repositories in AWS IA weren't accepting pull requests, so looks like they've turned a corner there. And the other one is that apparently they are using some open source modules as part of the solution, notably the Terraform AWS modules, which are those community modules many of you rely on. Of these, a couple of blueprints I think stood out. I thought looked nice. One was the implementation of add-ons, and tons and tons of add-ons here, which are basically just feature flags to enable if you want to deploy those on your cluster. And then the other one that stood out to me is a pattern for managing teams on a multi-tenant EKS cluster and how you'd organize those. And it lays out a nice hierarchical map structure where you could set the quotas per some namespace, assuming that every team gets their own namespace, and then enforcing certain labels on those namespaces. So if you haven't looked at it, I think it's a cool thing to check out. Anything to add to AWS EKS blueprints? Something, has anybody else already kicked the tires or looked at it? All right. Yet another Terraform registry. This is the show where we announce Terraform registries every week. And today's registry is TerraReg. No, I'm just kidding. It just feels like there are so many registries every single week. Everyone is picking up this as their weekend project to build a Terraform registry. So don't want to take away from TerraReg. It is another solution out there. It looks like it's in Python. They say that I think it's using a VCS-backed index. Was somewhere where I read, yeah, to automatically index modules. So hooks for your version control system to do that. And what made me think about that was just here, if you haven't checked out the awesome Terraform, it's a great source for, new projects or things around Terraform. Here's the list of registries that have been added here so far. I thought Terraform also did modules, but is it just providers? It's just a provider, Terraform provider registry. So it's in a class of one.
What would be the advantage to using this as opposed to anything else? I don't really get the whole point of it.
There's a few things. Well, okay, so I'm not saying that these registries solve it, but the driver for starting to host your own registry, both for the provider and modules, is if you want to start working with Terraform in a more air-gapped environment. Think about also how companies have been using Artifactory for decades for managing your dependencies. That was born out of a need to have stability in working in a vast open source ecosystem and having controls over when things change and assurances that, some SHA is some specific SHA, the artifacts behind it. So in Terraform, it's wild, wild west still. And you're depending on HashiCorp as a public registry. You have to be online or have to have that connectivity to the HashiCorp registry. There's no easy way to vendor those in and create a walled garden ecosystem. Keep in mind that Terraform modules can use child modules that use child modules, then that spans out. So it's not as simple as just copying that Terraform code into your version control system. You also then have to update all those sources that it uses, as well as then vendor those sources and so forth. So if there was a registry server that can do this and proxy it and cache it, for example, in S3, or just sit as an intermediary, preventing any requests to untrusted registries while allowing certain other ones, there's lots of use cases to have your own registry. Did that make some sense?
That makes sense. Yep.
Okay. So we are looking for this. We're not going to put our weight behind anything just yet. I think it's too early. There's also some things that we would want to see in the Terraform core to support this. I think we brought up one of those issues on office hours last week, maybe. It's basically the Terraform core doesn't make it easy to force requests to go through some sort of like a registry proxy. Which would be a requirement to really be able to do some of the things we would want to do. Registry.terraform.io, for example, is hard-coded right now in the core. The next one is something, I'm not sure, Vlad, you were the one who turned me onto this, I think over a year ago. Google's been publishing their State of DevOps report now for at least a few years. The latest one has just dropped as of May 26th. Has anyone had a chance to take a look at this and any highlights stand out?
Hold on, no. This is the survey. So this is collecting the data.
Facepalm. Okay, embarrassed. All right, yeah. So get your survey results in if you want to have your voice heard. Every vote counts.
and it really does. Like it's there in the first paragraph. Input from 32,000 professionals worldwide. Like this matters. So there shouldn't be an overrepresentation of we're doing GitOps and Kubernetes, or an overrepresentation of we're only doing VMs in data centers. So do take the survey, make your voice known. This is important because the results from this literally shape policies and give us a really, really awesome view into what we're doing and where we're going.
Well put. All right. Then the other announcement is from Mazin. You shared this one. I have not had a chance to look at it. Do you want to recap this and why it's interesting?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so as we already know, Twitch has been, there was an announcement of the Twitch breach that happened a few years ago, and the announcement was last year in 2021. And the hackers that were responsible for this breach leaked the source code of hundreds of projects that are made by Twitch. And this include financial data for the Twitch streamers, SRE code, and also what I found interesting, the internal security tools that were developed by Twitch security team. and all of them were public, are public in the internet. You can freely see them depending on different cases. And there was around 120 tools that were made public. I made an analysis where I reviewed every single tool here, reviewed their source code, their configuration, their setup, and anything that could make sense, and wrote this analysis for me as a reference so that I would be able to use it in the future, and also for everyone that would like to use it for understanding.
So these were private tools that got leaked when they were hacked, and now, but now they are. Did they actually then make them officially public, or they're just public by virtue of being leaked?
Yeah, they're public by being leaked.
Okay, just making sure.
So I'm
okay.
not, I'm not providing any links to download.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything here for legal reasons.
So agent con, a simple Go package to open an SSH agent socket.
Yeah. So there's like 130 repositories here. So
oh, you went through every, but I thought there were 130 just related to
just for security.
Security. Wow.
Exactly. And this is not the normal thing that the security team would be building. I have seen teams that have way less than that. And they cover everything from Terraform code, Terraform modules for different things, logging aggregators to move Cloudflare code as we are seeing now from Cloudflare APIs into Elasticsearch, and also to S3, things related to setups for Athena, AWS Athena, and almost done dozens and dozens of these things. And you would see this and you would be amazed by the amount of work that has been done, but yet the company has been breached. And this can be more of a reality check for people who are working in security.
It's ironic.
Yeah.
It's ironic that they are security tools.
Many of them are like internally developed security tools that are not that I don't typically see when in regular companies that I work for.
I wonder how many of them map back to forks of projects that are freely available.
Some of them are forks, like CTFD is like a open source CTF platform that you can run internally, and there are like few forks that are there. There are configurations for tools that are public, and vendor toolings that you can purchase, and they have configuration for that. But still, like the amount of effort that is being done is clear that they have done a lot.
One of the things that I noticed is that sometimes I encounter a tool internally that I think was developed internally. And the longer you work there, the more you find out that those tools are in fact not invented here.
True. That's why I spent at least 3 weekends going through every tool just to make sure that if this is actually something that wasn't developed internally or this is just a fork. Everything I try to map it through different GitHub repositories to make sure that what I'm seeing is not something that is just forked from somewhere else.
But I just remember the lean Java server, right? For a long time, I thought it was a tool that the company developed, and it turned out no, it used to be Tomcat before they decided to rename it.
I did not know Tomcat was renamed.
A few things that I kind of see that there is a less focus on were things related to identity management and access control. They are doing a lot of things related to asset discovery on resource discovery and scanning, but for things related to scanning IAM policies, I haven't seen things.
I think I've seen like 4 or 5 tools related to discovering secrets in different places.
I'd be curious to know how long did it take you to write this? I mean, this looks like a lot of work.
A lot of work. That's why the moment I started exploring this, I was like, this is an amazing use case for how to build a great security team.
Mm.
But yet, still, life happens and breaches
Yeah.
happens.
Well,
How
at
would
some
you
point,
know you-
every organization just gets so big. How do you stay on top of everything and all the tech debt that you get? Sorry, I cut off someone else.
I was gonna say, how do you know the validity though? Like if you go searching for this, that it's not the actual tool downloaded, like people haven't already gone into it and changed it, and like where do you get the actual source code for it? That would be the question.
Okay, because I'm also doing the same thing here of doing and building security programs. If, for example, tools that are doing secret scanning, this is something that I have been doing a lot of work on. So when I saw the source code, I started reading and making sure that this is an actual tool that became public, or they forked one public tool, or what did they do exactly. So I had to do a lot of review, like manual review, just to make sure that what I'm seeing is something that is custom or fork or an actual internally built tool.
Yeah. So this is where you then dug up what it was a fork from or other projects.
Yeah, exactly.
I find this fascinating, and I think it'd be interesting if somebody further developed this particular repository in actually finding tools that do this description, right? Because I think the fact that these exist probably means that this is something probably every company needs of size.
Yeah, certain
And
parts of it.
100%. The thought that I had is this can be an index where someone can go back into it and see what ideas the Twitch team had and how can we build something similar, and so hopefully it can be an inspiration for security teams.
definitely.
Could you imagine joining this team and having to learn this tool set? I mean, crazy.
Well, if you wanted to go work at Twitch, this would be a great place. At Twitch Security, this would be a great place to study. You know, do you want the job, or at least to get ready for the interview?
Yeah, yeah.
I actually thought the same thing when I downloaded the Twitch code base when it was leaked, purely out of curiosity. One, I wanted to see how they wrote the Terraform, and they write it just like everyone else. So it's kind of funny to see passwords in there on occasion. But the other thing was I was thinking about doing an interview with them and just kind of pointing out, hey, you guys did this in Terraform, like why? And just seeing how that went in the interview, given it's public. Obviously no malicious intent, purely curiosity and educational, but yeah.
That awkward thing, like when you stalk your date before a meeting. Oh, that was public information. It was on your LinkedIn. Sorry.
By the way, Mazin, how many hours did it take you? It took me about 10 hours when I pulled it. But I pulled it like within that same 3-day window when it was first released.
Pulling the data were not like I think I just left my laptop open for a full night and woke up to have it there. The thing that really took the time was the actual analysis. It took at least 3 weekends, so probably, wow, that was long. I missed a lot of things in that 3 weekends.
It's funny, as we're scrolling through that page you published, it says a lot of secret scanners, but I just remember seeing plain, like, you know,
secrets,
plain secrets in the term. Like, did it really work? So yeah, it's pretty funny.
Good. Actually, this is an excellent point. I would imagine I haven't reviewed like the SRE code. Probably you were reviewing the SRE code, right?
Yeah, I was only looking at the Terraform code. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So in the security code, I haven't really seen like secrets being hard coded. So probably what I can imagine is these tools were built out of a need of, hey, we have a lot of secrets that SRE and backend and front-end teams are hard coding within our code. So maybe we should build something for it. And then they built up these tools so that they would prevent the thing that you have seen while reviewing the other side of the code.
It's weird.
It's weird. I saw several things in there related to Google Cloud, and Twitch is owned by Amazon.
Is Twitch a streaming platform for gaming? Is that what they do?
That's how they started, but they do now, like lots of people do like live coding on Twitch now and things like that. But it's definitely more heavy for gaming.
For that matter, they teach calculus on Pornhub. There's one in Chinese and one in English.
No idea. Things you learn in office hours. All right. Any other announcements that we can bring up today? This is all I had on my list. Anything fun, interesting? Projects you're working on? Any cool open source projects you have?
I'm going to start working with Cloud Posse modules.
Woo!
I joined like 5 minutes late. Sorry, Eric, I was on a call. But did you happen to go over our new?
I haven't yet.
New organization.
Yeah, I can share that. So probably one of the most common requests, at least that catches my radar, is how do you guys organize your repositories for Terraform code? How do you organize your configurations? And what repository layout should I use? So those kinds of things. So, well, we've been trying to figure that out for the last 7 years. And I would say we haven't ever nailed it, but I think we're a little bit closer to nailing it recently. And I'm very excited with the work that we've done to do that. So let me show you here. So I want to share how are we organizing our configurations at Cloud Posse for supporting multiple AWS organizations, organizational units with infrastructure running across multiple regions, some of that infrastructure being global. And what does that look like? Also, how do we then support having like a service catalog where you can easily import configurations over and over again? I'll show you what that looks like. And yeah, let's get started. So stacks is what this concept that we think of when you have your infrastructure deployed, and it's everything that is logically grouped together. Many companies are using this terminology stacks. In fact, I've seen more than once people refer to Terraform root modules as a stack. And I don't really like that definition, because what that does is it encourages your Terraliths, saying that you should put everything that comprises a stack in one module. And then you have this problem where your stacks take 2-3 hours to plan. They fail half the time because of transitive errors or other things. So in our concept, we instead say, let's move up the stack. What we call stack is all the collection of all your root modules for some purpose. And then all your root modules are what we call components, these opinionated root modules. So at the top level here, we have our stacks folder. We have a catalog. This is a catalog where we can import from a library of pre-existing configurations of stacks. We have a concept of mixins where we have these configurations which aren't by themselves a stack, but we'd like to inherit from those settings. And then we have our actual top level stacks that we are deploying. So the epiphany we had this past week was, let's just do what Amazon has been telling us to do forever. And how does Amazon think about infrastructure? Well, you have organizations, and those organizations have organizational units, and those organizational units have accounts, and those accounts have regions, and those regions have resources defined within them. And that made everything seem to come together for us in how we are organizing our configuration. So here I'm looking at the Cloud Posse organization for CP Live. In our model, we can manage multiple organizations within your infrastructure repository. So in the CP Live organization, we have 2 organizational units. In this case, one is core and one is plat. You could have as many or as few as you want to use, but you should still be using organizational units. If I jump into plat, you see we have a few standard accounts you see within there. Plat is short for platform. So we have our dev account, prod account, sandbox account, and staging account, all within that organizational unit. Within that organizational unit then, and if within that account, if I go into prod, then here we see the resources deployed by region. And now there's things in Amazon that don't have a region, they're regionless, like Route 53. So that's why we have a file that represents that. And then we have a file per region itself. Show you what's inside of that. Like if we go into plat deb, maybe here, US East 2. So here's then what the configuration for all our stack running in US East 2. It's decomposed into dozens of smaller root modules, what we are calling components. And we are able to very easily import those configurations from the catalog. So we have a catalog for the VPC, we have a catalog for ACM, for WAF, and so forth. But if we just were importing all those configurations wholesale, we wouldn't have a way to override the settings per stack, which naturally need to be done. Like we don't want to have overlapping CIDR ranges. So here we are setting the CIDR range for the VPC in the dev account. So now it's really easy to see here. So in the dev account running in US East 2 under the platform RU in the CP Live organization, we have a VPC with this CIDR range. And we could have 10 VPCs or 1 VPC, it doesn't matter. We can just import that any number of times and change it. The other thing that we did was we've had this concept of mixins, and we have here we're leveraging this where we're mixing in some of the settings. Anytime we have a dev stage account, what's the baseline settings that we would need? So let me jump over here into our mixins. Right now, we've defined 2 categories of mixins: region. So region, every region we operate in, how do we want to baseline that? So if I go into US East 2, one of the things I want to highlight is we have this concept of like a short code for every region. And we don't use the full canonical name because that quickly exhausts the characters that you have available to you for AWS resource names. One thing that we do that I don't love, but there's some baggage there, is we are overloading the use of environment to represent the regional environment that things are operating in, not the conventional way that most people think of environments. So that we accept, and we're working towards probably undoing that baggage this year sometime, but it's not there yet. Then what availability zones do we, when we are saying we have a VPC operating in US East 2, what are the availability zones we want to focus on? And this is a default then that we're importing from this catalog of mixins here. And then stage. So stage is a operating environment. Think of it like in the theatrical sense, you have multiple stages. For most companies, those stages are, dev, staging, prod. Well, you could have other archetypes for stages as well. But if I jump into the standard one that we're all familiar with, so here we're just setting the variables for that stage. So now anytime we import the dev stage, we have baselined the minimum settings for that. And then catalogs, which is where we have all the configurations that you pull in for a given service. So like if we're deploying an EKS cluster, we have this concept of blue-green clusters. And then they inherit from a baseline, and that baseline inherits from other catalog configurations. So you can see our configurations very nicely just layer up and deep merge on top of each other. So when we have a blue cluster, we can inherit from the cluster defaults. We import this configuration and inherit from this specific component, and then set some settings for everything. Defining a parallel EFS file system, the parallel EFS controller, so forth.
Hey, Eric, quick question. The catalog is basically applies to the entire estate. So you're centralizing config there and kind of having a module that we talked about this in the last couple of weeks, right? That is, am I understanding this correctly?
Can you say that first part again though?
Basically, you're centralizing config for the entire estate, and
for the entire estate,
like everything that a company is managing with Terraform.
Yeah. I think of it like in terms of a service catalog, for example. And so, for example, our component library. Okay, Matt, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing that might make this much more clear. So if we look at the catalog, what all these YAML files, basically when you run Atmos against them or our Terraform AWS utils Terraform provider, either one of those two, what ends up happening is they get reduced down to a set of Terraform variables that get passed to a component. That's really what all this config is doing. So if you look at the catalog is basically like Cloud Posse, in this case, like Cloud Posse's default settings for any of these components that we have in the catalog itself. So like if we have EKS there, that's basically saying, whenever we deploy an EKS cluster, here are our default settings. And then in each account or region or whatever, you have the ability to override the defaults as well. So the catalog is basically just the default variables, if you will, that get passed to those components. And then further down in the stacks, you can override those defaults if you want the instance type to be bigger or smaller than what's defined in the defaults. You can specify that at any level of the config, and it just overrides the defaults that we've set up in the catalog.
Gotcha, thanks.
So these variables are just Terraform variables. That's all they are. We write them to a var file, but the magic is that we have this concept of layering, so we can import, so you can create very dry configurations. Like the S3 bucket component here, and variables. These are the same variables that you would be familiar working with if you're using Terraform or components.
And that generates that file for you, like that whole file for you?
Yeah, so basically we then take this, deep merge it all, write the TFR file at runtime.
Yeah,
so there's always
we just be clear that the Atmos does that.
Yes,
that's what the Atmos
right.
tool does.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is
How
this
does it-
tool here.
How does it know if it's a map? I mean, is it when you set it as false, it knows it's Boolean and just automatically does that?
We are under the hood. We're using merge go. I forget the package, but it's a Golang tool for merging data structures in JSON or YAML. So if we are not doing validation at this late stage, so Atmos is not intuiting what your variables are in Terraform code. However, since we are just using a var file, when Terraform is run, Terraform will tell you that was not a Boolean, or we were expecting a map, but we got a list. So the reason why we did it this way is that we just piggyback on exactly what Terraform was already doing.
Yeah. Although we have been talking about doing schema validation of those files, but we haven't quite gotten there yet.
Yeah. I think
one thing
that's where we'd like to get.
Quick thing. One thing that concerns me about using YAML configs, and that pattern is great, and I use it all over the place now, is validating the input. At what point, like how soon can you validate input? Because a lot of times Terraform, JSON, or YAML validation errors aren't that helpful. And I'm trying to hand this over to users to use. So one thing I've been considering is like a module that is fit everything else depends on, that just does variable validation. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that's probably a slightly outdated view of the Terraform validation, especially if you're using like the validation keyword, like in Terraform, where you can actually validate your input variables, because it will actually it'll actually give you an error message that matches exactly what you say if the input isn't what it expected. Like you can literally say, this variable has to contain one of these. In this case right here, if the variable isn't one of those items in that list, right on the console, it's going to say VPN client authentication type must be one of this or this. Or if you say, it's a range of numbers from 1 to 10 and someone puts in 11, it will say this must be a range of 1 to 10. But you do have to do the work to do the validation there. But that's sort of the edge of into your Terraform code. So that's the place that it probably makes the most sense to spend the time doing the validation, there. And honestly, we haven't had a lot of problem with figuring out if you mess up a value in the YAML, like it's usually pretty clear like what you messed up and why, like at least in our experience.
Thanks, Matt. I do a lot of, I guess the next question that I would have then is like, at what point are you manipulating the data that comes in to, like, for instance, do overlays of defaults from the service level over the environment level over the default,
So
I pull it in just to to clarify my, my concerns. I pull it in and then I'm doing a bunch of stuff and trying to figure out whether I want to massage that stuff there or pass that data structure, usually just like a map of configs right into the submodules and then validate it there each time, which gives me the input, the variable validation. But still, there's stuff I have to do with the root module, and I'd sort of like to validate that as soon as it comes in, and then decide, then pass it on. Please tell me I'm overthinking this.
Yeah, I think you're overthinking it, honestly. Like, well, at least because if you do deep merging like we do, the import order of all these things basically is the important part, like of how you import like one over the other. Like, so if you go and plan like, a bottom level stack that's in the dev account and it has imports all the way up the chain, you basically just get a merged config that already has has already taken into account which parts of the base you've overridden. Like, you don't have to do that in Terraform. Like, Atmos will do that for you, or if you need it for some other reason outside of Atmos, we like our Terraform AWS utils. Not our Terraform utils provider actually does the same thing, where it will just take all of the YAML inputs and give you a single set of key value pairs of variable name equals whatever, variable name equals whatever, variable name equals whatever. And we just pass that to Terraform. And then you can just use native Terraform, validation to make sure that those values are within the ranges that you expect them to be. Like, I think that you don't really need to do a lot of manipulation probably, unless I'm just missing like some very sort of
I'd have to get an
proprietary
actual
use case
yeah.
that that we don't have there. So glad to look at it though. If you send me one like on a Slack, and I could tell you kind of how we handle that.
Thanks. For the most part, these are multi-stacks in Spacelift, and it's like a default config and then a bunch of overrides with client environment and account number and maybe some other stuff,
That's exactly what we're doing here too. Yep.
Yeah.
I just desperately want to make sure that it's transparent to the users, what the problem is with their code. But, I appreciate the input. Just FYI, my implementation's a little more lax than my my ideals here, which are clearly still developing. But thank you for that input.
Yeah, not a problem. I would say if you're going to get strict anywhere, get strict at your entry point, because that actually will be the thing that you can most easily, you can fail fast, and you can easily validate that the things are what you expect them to be before you pass them on to any submodules or any of that kind of thing.
Okay, so do you have schemas for all your YAML configs? Or did you say something about that recently?
I said that we want to get there, but where I'm saying your entry point, I actually mean your entry point into Terraform, meaning what your root module that's being planned, use validation on the variables of your root module. And then even if you're using 7 layers deep of variables like below that are coming from that from the inputs into that root module. As long as you validated them there, they're not going to change as you pass them down the stack.
All right. So another question I had, changing topics now, unless any other questions on, well, okay, we can answer this one here by Sharif actually after this. Any more questions on Atmos and the YAML stack configurations and inheritance before we move on? All right. So there is another tool for terraformers out there. I'm sure everyone who's been doing Terraform for some time has been using or looked at TerraGrunt and is aware of it. There's been many others over the years as well. TerraSpace. There's a tool called Astro by Uber. I think it's been abandoned more or less. And a new one has come out by a company called Mineros, and Terramate is very similar in some ways to TerraGrunt in that what they've done is they've continued to adopt the HCL language for the configuration. And it has also added some interesting capabilities. Two that stand out to me would be, one is the change detection, which I think is a really nice addition to their tool. The idea is that Terramate itself is Git aware, so that it can then identify which configurations have changed between any two refs, and therefore strategically plan and apply those changes based on dependencies between those projects. So that was a nice addition to Terramate. I think the other one was code generation. I think it's a consistently needed pattern to make up for some of the limitations that you have working with Terraform. Obviously, if you were using Pulumi or something like that, these problems wouldn't even exist. But one of the massive limitations of Terraform is you cannot have dynamic provider blocks. But guess what? You can generally generate your provider blocks dynamically in code and then run your Terraform code to achieve kind of the same pattern or the same thing. So Terramate has the concept of file generation. It supports generating, for example, your backend Terraform file using a code block like this, as well as generic file generation. So you can generate any file here. I would be cautious of doing too much code generation. You're building an unwieldy beast to debug and validate in every configuration. But when you just have to, solve something or get around it, it's a nice Swiss Army knife for that use case. Anything else to add to Terramate?
Hey, I have something to share with you guys, I guess, since this is, basically one of the 3 places in the world where anybody would possibly give a shit. But based on, a lot of research and a lot of talk that we've had here, we chose Spacelift, back in the second half of last year, and have got it up and running, all managed with Terraform. And right now, it's been really hugely successful and a lot of fun, a lot of interesting stuff, and discovered a bunch of different patterns. My infrastructure, I basically have like 10 client accounts that I have to apply both the application stuff as well as other infrastructure related things and access. So right now, what I'm working on is I set up a multi-stack for the application deploys, and this is really a Terralith. It does a lot. But now what I've done is I've created an infrastructure and an access multi-stack. Then I'm pulling out the things like the Datadog, daemon set, and whatever else, alert logic. So that's going to be in the infra. We're pulling out the sub account user permissions, not the app permissions, out into access, including Kubernetes. because one of the problems we've had is that they were in with the application, so we'd have to wait for a full release cycle to prod before those changes would get there. Anyway, with Spacelift, we've got a routing stack for each of these. It's, gets triggered by certain changes, and every account gets all the right permissions and level separate from the apps, so we can now iterate over user permissions and give them the right thing instead of having to go in there and hack it. Anyway, it's just been really cool. And I gotta say, I'm really excited to be at this place. It's been a lot of work and a lot of contributions from you guys, which is definitely much appreciated.
That's cool, Eric. I know you've been working at that for a long time. So
No way, isn't it?
persistence pays off.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Oh, very
usually
cool.
one of those things where I'm like, about to confirm a plan, and I'm like, holy crap, man, I've literally been working on this for a year and a half, like knowing that this moment was, and then it just works and you're off to the next thing. It's really lovely, wonderfully uneventful most of the time,
You're leaving a legacy. So you were mentioning a word there I hadn't heard in context of Spacelift. You said multi-stack. Is that a Spacelift function?
Yeah, they use that term.
Okay.
So we've got a couple different kinds of multi-stacks. So there's things like Bastion access, where
Can you define multi-stack first?
yeah,
What
it's
it means to you?
multiple stacks that get the same basic code applied. They sort of operate.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah.
So basically,
Yeah.
we'll have a stack that has, let's just simple case, a stack that has that's attached to the users and groups repo, which has both config and all the code for that. And then there are stacks for each sub account or each account we have that apply those based on the module and the config in the other account. And they have a depends on tag on each of those, with a policy on the primary one that says, yeah, trigger everything that depends on me. So as soon as anything changes in the Bastion access repo, config or code, it kicks off all however many other ones automatically.
That's nice.
Then there's the one for the applications that has very different config across all of them. So it just requires a little bit of a different, approach. But it turns out there's like 2 or 3 different patterns there, including just an empty stack that uses a no-op empty main.tf just to be successful with the trigger dependent policies, dependent stacks policy. So, you get into things of like, well, that check triggered all those things, but that's very meaningless since it's a no-op module and it's really the sub modules that get triggered by that. But that's a rabbit hole that no one's going down at this point.
All right. Well, let's switch gears to the next question. I just had a quick question for the audience. How many of you are using the AWS Marketplace to purchase services or SaaS offerings or things like that?
We have once or twice. I mean, usually
I think we use it for MS SQL. We use the Marketplace to get, like, we have EC2 instances that are using MS SQL.
Yeah.
Yeah, we also use it for we downloaded like an open VPN appliance through there, that kind of stuff.
Cool.
I
You guys
think
have enterprise agreements or?
we're thinking of using it just so that we can consolidate our spend and eventually qualify for an EDP.
Okay. Yeah, the EDP.
I'll be the standout and just say I rarely go to the marketplace. I think the only time I've been there is to verify that I want to use Ubuntu for free. I think you have to do that in the marketplace, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah, I can say I personally have had a lot of experience with very large enterprise customers, and the use case that I see there is that individual managers or engineers don't have purchasing power to go out or the process is arduous to go out and contract with third parties to do so. But if they can get it all on their AWS bill, that's pre-approved and goes to the right budgets and everything else without them having to get approvals for that. And I've seen that pattern occur over and over and over again. Like if you can sell it to me through the marketplace, I have an unlimited budget. If I need to go to contracting, who knows what happens? Like I can only spend $10,000, that kind of stuff. It's pretty crazy how it works there, and how some large organizations look at it. They just look at it as the AWS bill, and they don't really care as long as it comes in that way.
Yeah,
They bundle licenses sometimes and it's cheaper to get it through the marketplace than it would be if you were to, self-license something or whatever. So that it does make sense on some aspects.
yeah. I've actually observed the same thing Matt was mentioning around it being easier in terms of contracts. The other thing is, I don't know if you mentioned already, Eric, is enterprise agreements. If you make a certain commitment of like 600 grand a month or something that you may not be able to hit for the year, you can apparently use your enterprise agreement and hit that spend amount with marketplace products. Some vendors, I think like Artifactory, when I was chatting with them, they had flexibility to move back and forth between a contract independent of the AWS Marketplace or the AWS Marketplace if you want to leverage your EA enterprise agreement discounts as well as hit your quota.
That's cool. Yeah. Just curious. It's one of those things we're looking at Cloud Posse being able to help customers better, possibly through the AWS Marketplace. So, all right. Well, we got a little bit more time here.
There's also one second for Cloud Posse specifically. There's also AWS IQ and the professional services thingy, which can also be sold to marketplace. It's not only software, it's also
no, professional services, exactly, and private offers and so forth. So that's specifically the delivery model we're looking at there.
I know we have a short period of time. I could probably answer question number 7 pretty quickly if you want to jump around. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. Let's see here. I'm gonna open that up in Slack here. Oops. My Slack window is too big.
I think I don't know. The question seems to stand pretty well on its own there, even without the context.
Yeah, so this was something we pulled out of the AWS channel. I'm not sure if Dan Harrington is on the call today. Doesn't look like he is, but we can still answer. Hey, I was wondering if anyone had some good criteria for why you would create an event bus and not just use the default. Is it just for logically partitioning rules and events for user identification? As we deploy out our CICD pipeline, I'm leaning towards creating an event bus for the EC2 states changes, but would be interested in how others are using event buses. Go for it, Matt.
Yeah, so sorry, did someone have said something before that?
Well, I used event bus for ECR when we would push a new Docker image that had a latest, it would automatically deploy it to ECS. We used it for briefly here, but we've since shut it down, but we were using it.
Got it. Yeah, so I think the reason to create multiple, so every account has the default AWS event bus, and that's where AWS actually sends all of the events for everything that occurs in, yeah, you're right, it's EventBridge, the EventBridge event bus. So that's where AWS actually sends all the events that occur within AWS. So you can subscribe to those, but there's a few different things. So one, the way that you usually do this is you create an event bus rule. You then subscribe to certain events and conditions on that bus. So there's a limitation. I think it's 300. You can only have 300 rules per event bus. So that's definitely one reason that you might want another event bus if it's really busy. If you're doing events with partners, it makes sense. Either partners or third-party SaaS apps. It makes sense to receive those on dedicated event buses for those so that you can secure them to the very specific thing that you're looking for. A lot of people use event buses in domain-driven design and CQRS, where they're like event storming and doing those things, and having an event bus per domain is actually a pretty common thing. So like your your shopping cart domain or whatever, or your shopping domain might have a particular event bus where your auth domain has a separate event bus, and the microservices in there would subscribe to those different things. And then if you want to do like aggregations from one region to another or one account to another, it's pretty common to have like aggregation event buses that you send messages to that are destined to to be aggregated somewhere else. So that's my quick 1 minute answer to his question. And obviously, if on a different call, if he Dan has some more questions about it, we can elaborate more. But I've used it pretty extensively and pretty familiar with all the event-bus stuff.
All right. Yeah, I don't have anything else to add to that. There was another question here I saw from Shivanashu about adding people to EKS cluster an easy way. We did have this link. I haven't tried it out, so this is not a big endorsement, but it is an open source project which deliberately aims to solve this problem. And we shared it last week, I believe, at office hours. So I just wanted to bring that up again in case anyone has tried it. All right, next, let's see, one last question maybe before we wrap things up. I think those are too hard. There was one announcement I skipped over, I realized. So we brought up last week, what are the most annoying issues or most popular issues in Terraform core, and one of those was that you cannot have sane defaults for objects. The experiment for that was terminated and was not going to get released into the core, but here's a new pull request just opened up, which is attempting to address this same problem, adding this optional keyword, I guess. So that looks interesting. And these changes were approved yesterday. So that's even more exciting. And someone else was saying that these could make it into Terraform 1.3. So that would mean in the next month or two.
I, for one, would be able to delete a ton of code if that existed.
This would be cool. All right, everyone. Well, I think that wraps it up for today. I appreciate everyone's participation in our office hours here. It's a great help. I learn things every time we meet, including this conversation on eventbus. Honestly, I learned something from that. So if you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, head over to youtube.com/cloudposse and subscribe. It does help us out a great bit. If you haven't yet registered for our weekly office hours and want an invite, go to cloudposse.com/office hours and we'll send you a weekly reminder and a calendar invitation that goes on your calendar there. Connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Osterman. And if you are ever interested in working with Cloud Posse and want to see if we're fit, pretty selective about the kinds of customers we work with, but the best way to get started is go to cloudposse.com/quiz. Again, cloudposse.com/quiz to see if we're fit. See y'all same time, same place next week. Have a great rest of your week.
Bye all.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye. Yeah, bye.